So, Holly, let me ask you the broad question that I asked at the beginning, and then I will ask both of you also to answer. So, what would it take to get San Diego to the top of the top?
Well, as the CEO of a women's empowerment group that has really, for the last 20 years, been fast-tracking women working in the STEM economy, we at Athena are really determined to make San Diego a destination that is dominated by diversity. And if you think about the war for talent that's happening in companies, not only in STEM, when you think about the war for customers and market share, having that diversity, having a modernized workforce is really a profound competitive advantage in our eyes.
Karen, Tim?
Gosh, I would say I think one of the advantages of San Diego right now is that a lot of our companies are relatively kind of mid-level, smaller organizations, which is really attractive. Some of this scale actually just comes with the continued transformation and growth that happens as you get bigger and bigger. I do think that San Diego and all of the companies here are just poised to be leaders in diversity and leadership. And the more we model that, then the next generation is going to want to come. Why would you want to go work for an old stuffy company if you can work for a company that's contemporary, that's compelling, that has a higher purpose, that is modern in its infrastructure and approach to leadership, and that's what's going to help us grow.
Yeah, so 35 years ago, there was 2 innovation companies in town, Qualcomm and Hypertech, biotech and a high-tech company. And here we are today with this incredible innovation ecosystem that many of us are part of. And if we look forward and say, what's it going to take to get to the next level, we have to look at where we are now, which is we're creating 400 innovation companies each year. And to get more innovation companies, you need more entrepreneurs. You need more people that are willing to take those risks. You need money to support that, and you need a community that's going to support it. We think we have the community, we have the intellectual network here with the universities and the academic, the research institutions that we have. But we need more people that and more support for those entrepreneurs that are coming out. And that, if we have both sexes, we've just doubled our numbers, right? So it's a good opportunity right now to be an entrepreneur, and it's a unique cat. So there's not a lot of them out there, and we need to encourage them and support them.
So I want to ask the why question behind that 2% figure again. 2% of women leading biotech companies, and why? From your vantage point, Holly.
So Matt, that's the $50 million question. I mean, this is an audience, and this is certainly, as a global STEM hub, we love data. We live and die by data. And so it's a pretty stunning scenario when you think about the big picture. Let's contextualize what the data, what the figures tell us as we look around and try to figure out how are we going to stay competitive, and how is San Diego going to maintain its global biotech hub position. So when we think about the population of the planet, how many people, let me see a guess in the audience, how many people, who do you think is the majority sex in the population of the globe? Women, thank you very much. 51% the global population are women. When we think about the purchasing power of women, 80% of the purchasing power is influenced by women. When we think about the U.S. wealth, the total wealth, 60% of the U.S. wealth is held by women. So it is a very odd conundrum that on the other side of the ledger, we have the 2%. Actually, it's 15% of women that are actually serving on boards of Fortune 500 companies. I have about 5% of women that are in the C-suite, and this is more broadly. And then we have about 2% of female funders, VC money going to female founders. So It is a stunning set of statistics, and it really begs the question, if we can sequence the human genome here in San Diego, ladies and gentlemen, surely we can sequence women working in the STEM economy. Can I get an amen on that? I mean, we're a pretty smart group. I'm really, really not underestimating our ability to see what womankind can do for our society.
So, Karen, you're coming in pretty fresh. You have been in San Diego, which means that you get to see the industry here and the ecosystem with new eyes. And I'm curious, what have you observed? What could the city be doing better to really empower folks who are underrepresented at the tops of these companies? And I also want to ask the how question. How do companies themselves?
I'm passionate about this topic. First, I would say it is not unique to biotech or life sciences or San Diego. So, right, let's start there. I think one of the things that we can do as an industry, and particularly in San Diego, and this is something we're talking about in my own company, is we must be intentional and purposeful about wanting to drive diversity in everything that we do. So yes, it starts with the numbers. Well, how do you get the numbers? Well, if you lead talent acquisition, you have to work harder to find a diverse slate of candidates. You have to work harder to find 28% of the women that are in STEM in San Diego, right? Or life sciences in the globe. You have to work harder to capture the 10% of African Americans who are working in STEM. And you have to have your own litmus test to say, if you aren't kind of at those numbers, why is that? And what can you do about it? I think the previous panel talked a little bit about getting STEM education earlier. I think that absolutely is a foundation. So it goes beyond what we're doing internally. It's about advancing STEM from kindergarten on, because we are seeing that women and underrepresented groups are actually losing traction in going into STEM. And research is also showing that when they start in STEM, then they leave. Okay, why is that? Well, it's because they get into STEM and all their leaders are in a different dominant group. And this is where this idea of inclusion comes in, and how we treat people and how we model fairness in everything we do. And it's little things like, if you have an interview panel of 6 people to interview this lab manager, is there anyone who is in the non-dominant group on the interview panel? I mean, statistically, if you just do the math, if it's all the same group, it is unlikely that they will pick someone who's not like the dominant group. So I think foundationally, there are some very logical things we can do to make a difference to advance our opportunity to find the best candidate, because we've actually evened the playing field. So I would challenge us all to go for that.
Tim, one of the things that you mentioned in your response just now is just that funders need to be connected with resources. And one of the pipeline challenges that I think funders from underrepresented backgrounds can be running into is actually that their research gets funded at a lower level. That's true of women. I think it's also true of people of color in San Diego. And I'm curious, what obligations do you feel that our industry has, and companies like the companies that you all represent have, to try to correct for that deficit that's happening at the grant-making stage somewhere in NIH?
You know, I don't even see it as an obligation as much as a necessity. I mean, if we're going to continue to grow this economy, we need as many people as we can that are well-trained and well-funded to be able to do that work. And so when I had a company called Pharmatech Laboratories, we had about 200 interns come through that program. It wasn't because we wanted to support a lot of interns. It was because we needed a workforce development program, and the internship was the best way to do it. And through that internship program, and having 25 to 40 interns at any time, you're selecting the interns that you're bringing in for that program. And that's where you control that at the very grassroots level of bringing these kids in to train. And those are the kids that end up becoming your managers, your senior directors, your VPs of your company. And so if you look at the organization chart for that company today, it's littered with kids that all started as interns. We control that. We control the number of women, we control the number of minorities. That's where you start.
To that point, Karen, one of the things that you mentioned when you were talking with the team earlier was about, and when we were just talking earlier tonight, it was about San Diego importing talent. And I think that's also a challenge that I heard from some of the company, the folks who are hiring, who are in the room with us, that we are looking to the highest level graduates of PhD programs from outside of San Diego. What do you think the city needs to do to grow and support more of the talent that's coming from the region?
Yeah, I think right now, it's an opinion obviously, I think right now the kind of growth curve we're at is that the talent and sophistication and experience of talent that we need has not quite grown up in San Diego yet, but that will change, right? So I think we're at a moment in time where we're importing people who have leadership experience, managerial experience, and some of those soft skills that come with practice, right, over times and years, and we're importing them back in. As our companies get bigger and continue to grow, that shouldn't be the case, right? You can develop from within, you can hire more fresh grads and groom them internally. I just think, San Diego's relatively small compared to a LA or a San Francisco or a Boston or New York, where people can move to 12 different companies and not have to leave their house, right? They can just take public transportation. So it's just kind of the state of where we are, but I would predict 7 years, 10 years from now, that curve will have completely shifted.
Holly, what do you think is San Diego's best competitive advantage for innovation in biotech right now?
When I think about what's happening on the global scale, I mean, arguably there is a seismic shift in what society says is acceptable and the value that we associate to women and to underrepresented groups. I mean, the millennials are really changing the way in which we think and the way in which we operate and the way in which we place our value system. And I love that. And it's really challenging us. It's challenging groups like the Atlantic magazine to actually have this level of conversation, to bring people together in a room and to take it all over the country and to talk about the elephant in the living room. I mean, it all starts with having a candid conversation about leaving out half of the workforce from the science and the innovation and the impact that we're just leaving on the sidelines. I mean, forget the piles of money that we're leaving on the table when we don't have women running the boardroom or running the companies, because the research from Merrill Lynch, from the McKinsey report, showed time and time again that there is a significant increase in profitability, there's an increase in the innovation cycle, there's an increase in talent retention, and also shareholder value. So if you're going to look at your customer in the eye, if you're going to look your shareholder in the eye and say, we're going to leave money on the side because we want to just stay the course and status quo is what we're going to put the grip of death on. That's not going to happen for too much longer. And, I think part of the opportunity that you asked me, which is how can San Diego really be competitive, I think it's really addressing the perception gap. I'm going to use an example, Mark Benioff, household name.
CEO of Salesforce. Former?
Mark Benioff is an absolute technology titan that is recognized for his genius, and he went on national television and just point blank said, oh, we absolutely have pay parity. We at Salesforce, we honor the same from women that we do men in the way in which we pay. And then the next day, his VP of HR said, boss, yeah, that's actually not correct. And so $10 million later, 7 million, some such figure, he actually corrected it. And so it really is the opportunity, because if you don't understand that there's a problem, that there is pay disparity, if you don't understand that there are microaggressions happening in your culture, we don't need to talk about Uber. We don't need to talk about Google saying that women are biologically inferior. And if you don't understand that as a leader, then how can we start to conduct that course correction? How can we invite the young women from Maricosta College, from UC San Diego to come into the tech sector? And instead, we're seeing a 50% exit rate from women in the tech sector. We don't need to ask the why. Thanks to social media, we know why. And so I honestly, I'm excited. I'm not up here crying a river. I'm actually excited, and I have so much respect for the Atlantic magazine, and I know Mrs. Jobs is part owner of the Atlantic magazine, and she wants to have this conversation. And it's uncomfortable, but where there's discomfort, there's growth. And welcome to San Diego, because that's what we're known for. So let's get to work.
Aloha. Tim, what are you saying to your fellow industry leaders now about how the ecosystem needs to adjust and develop? And to call back to our earlier conversation with Kit and Sunny, what are you saying to educators in the San Diego community?
Yeah, so we have some real advantages here in San Diego. One is that we have this incredible intellectual network for innovation, and that the anchor tenants are the universities and the academic institutions. The other thing that we have that's unusual is we have an entrepreneurial community that's robust. It needs to grow, but it's robust. And those people are risk takers. And the third thing that you really need there is you need infrastructure to support those risk takers. It turns out that if you're a lawyer, an accountant, or if you're in real estate and you're supporting innovation and entrepreneurs, guess what? You're also a risk taker, because when they go down, you go down. And so we have that type of economy here where they support that. And as a service provider, when I was a service provider, I knew that when my biotech company went down, I might lose some money, and that was part of the deal. It's also part of the deal when you're the entrepreneur, when you're the university. We're all in it together, but the intellectual network is really incredible. And so you said on a go-forward basis, for the universities, the most important thing that we need trained scientists and engineers. And they come out educated from the academic setting, but they don't necessarily have the skills that we need. So there's a skills gap between graduates and what we need in industry. And to top that off, we have a very low unemployment rate, and it's even lower amongst scientists and engineers. So we really need these kids to come out ready. The programs, the sustainable companies, the profitable companies that are out there have to set up internship programs to get these kids experience. And if you're hiring interns at junior and senior level, by the time they get into the company, it's a great workforce training program, and they're ready to go. And that's an important part of what we're trying to do. If you're a biotech company and you have just a big pile of money that you're burning through, you don't have time to wait around for workforce development over 3 years. You need to go out and hire people immediately. And that's where immigration reform is really important, is that we need to be able to go anywhere in the world to find the exact person that we need to get this company started right away.
So one more question. I'm going to point to Karen before I turn it over to a question from the audience. But Karen, having been a leader in talent and inclusion generally, what would you say are the most successful initiatives that you've seen at the college and university at the educator level to position students for success at the top of these fields?
Yeah, I agree with what you were saying. They come out with the technical aspects of their job, but where do you teach people how to have conflict with a colleague, how to be inspirational and see what's possible? How are you able to communicate and sell your idea? How can you go to your boss and say, I'm worried about something? And so all of these soft skills, I think are a challenge for academia, beyond, again, biotech, because in my last world, it was the same challenge. People come out really smart, and they've got all their ducks in a row, and they can do the math, and they can use the equipment, but when you ask them to, stop gossiping in the back and go tell their colleague that hurt their feelings, it's a little bit more difficult. So I think there is a whole social side to academia that we've really got to invest in, so that what comes out is a more well-rounded person to face the job and everything that goes around the job.
Let's turn to the audience for a question. All right, here in the front.
Hi, Jason Moorhead with Alexander Real Estate Equities. Longtime hard copy subscriber too.
Thank you very much.
I can't cite the source, but I've heard recently and maybe used, and I'm surprised that no one has brought this up, that UCSD is graduating 2 times as many STEM graduates as both Harvard and MIT combined. So we have the talent.
I'm looking for Kit nodding her.
And the other comment about, you know, why we're at the top of the pack, but maybe just number 3 back.
But do you have a question, sir?
No.
I have an answer to that question.
The question is, what's the source? So
All right.
fact check me, I guess.
I think there is no shortage of great talent in San Diego. I will tell you what we're finding is that the jobs that we have are actually not the entry-level jobs. And that's something we're trying to wrap our arms around about. How do we, when we have an opening that's requiring kind of 3 to 5 years of experience, how are we grooming internal talent so that ultimately the ripple effect of the job that you open is a fresh grad? And we haven't solved that yet, but it is something we're aware of because that's how we're going to capitalize on this great community in San Diego.
And we're going to hear a fast follow from Kit Pogliano.
Yeah, so we have way more graduates in STEM than Stanford and Harvard. And we have we're the top school for female STEM graduates in the nation. So yeah.
All right, so this conversation is called the Innovators Lab. We spent a lot of time talking about inclusion, and I think one of the takeaways I'm drawing from this conversation is the two are very, very connected, that we can't innovate for everybody if we're not including everybody. So thank you so much to Holly and Karen and Tim for your participation, and again to Sunny and Kit for your answers to the questions, and thanks to all of you once again for joining us.